Hello? Whoa, look at that. New setup. 100% more webcam. Um, Welcome to the stream, everybody. I hope you're all doing well. I am sort of melting here, but otherwise doing good. So today's stream is sort of picking up where we left off. Last time we were removing trailing/redirects from axum because we'll be removing the feature in 0.5. Since then, there's been a little bit of like back and forth around. There's a user who, let me just fix my scroll direction, who wanted, still wanted the feature in some sense or another, and then I suggested that we could add like a helper to axum extra that sort of brought it back. So I did that in this PR. So basically, if we look at the test, axum extra has this route ext trait, which you can't see in the diff here. There it is. And so if you like add a route with, you can call this route with TSR method, and that's this trailing/redirect. If your route doesn't have a trailing slash, then it adds this route, and then it adds another route that redirects like requests with a trailing slash to this one that you define here, and vice versa. If your route that you add have a trailing slash, then you automatically get a route that does sort of the opposite. So in this way, you can sort of opt into the old behavior if you don't want to use the normalized path middleware that we also wrote last time. Cool. I think there's some review comments here that I actually think we can just accept. I did look at them earlier today and they all seem fine. Commit suggestion. And we also found there was a user in Discord who found a bug with how we made the URL that we're going to redirect for in the old trailing/redirect feature that we have now since removed. There was a bug where, for some reason, the HTTP library would sometimes construct a URL that didn't have a scheme. And if you tried to add a path and a query to a URL, or URI rather, that didn't have a scheme, it would just panic. Or rather, it would return an error, and then we would unwrap and then actually panic on that one. And I did look, and Tower HTTP does actually have the same issue. So I figure we should actually fix that as well in the implementation that we did and add a test for it. Specifically this one here, this one might panic. So if the URI that comes in doesn't have a scheme for whatever reason, if we then set a query, that will actually end up panicking here. Honestly, I'm not sure if that's a bug in HTTP or if that's just how the URI standard works, but it's definitely, like, we definitely don't want to panic there. That's pretty bad because it's panic on user input, basically. I was kind of wondering if the test that I wrote for it was in this file somewhere. It's this one. So it just sort of constructs a URI here that doesn't have a path, and then it tries to like replace the path with something else, and then that would panic. So let's try to just hop over into Tower HTTP while CI runs on this one. I think we should be good. No, there's one failing. What is this? Let's look at that next. Hop into Tower HTTP first. I don't know if there are any suggestions here. Any suggestions from the pull request? It didn't seem like it. So the test was something like this. And what was our route? Remove trailing slash. So this should be fine, because here we check if it doesn't end with a trailing slash, then we just return. So maybe we're not vulnerable to this issue at all. Because I don't even know if you're able to, like, what happens if this URI doesn't have a scheme, but if you like construct it with a path and then parse it into URI, it might actually fail right there. Let's see. Yeah, it fails even in the parse on line 195. Can we write a test for it then? I don't think so. I think we should still handle it and just sort of do it based on the types. But I'm not totally sure. Because that means we can't even, and like doing something like this, that probably panics in the same way as well, I think. Yeah, that's the same one. And if we just do that, is that also fine? Yeah, that doesn't panic. Let's just remove this test and say this one is actually we can just return a result here. The signature is a bit weird, where it like returns a result of nothing if the mutation succeeded. I think we should probably just return a new URI here, but we can fix that afterwards. And then it's going to complain about not using the right type, and we can use this error type here just fine because it's an internal function. And then up here, we don't actually have to return the error at all. We just, if this fails, we just don't change the URL. That's fine, because we're not like, the issue that we had in Axum was that we were constructing a URI to redirect to, which meant that if, like, we couldn't just return the same URI, because then you would have like a redirect loop. But in this case, we're just delegating to some inner service. So that means that if this one fails and we can't replace the path for whatever reason, then the service will just be called with the same URI, which isn't the end of the world. That's probably fine. If let okay and new URI. There we go. That shouldn't panic. Cool. No, I don't think so. So the question was if you call into parts and then from parts right after, does it panic? I don't think so. I think it only panics if you look at the test case again. Here, if you try to add a path to it and it doesn't have a scheme, then when you like put it back together with from parts, then it panics. Where did I put the HTTP crate? From parts. So it's I think it's specifically this one. Or maybe it's not that the scheme is missing, but the authority. It was this one that we're missing, or that we were hitting rather. So it specifically is, there is an authority, I don't quite remember what that is, and then if there is also a path and query. But like the scheme is none. Yep. But I think we should actually be good here. Fix potential panic when removing slash from URI. What was the CI fail that we got here? I was pretty sure I fixed this one, and I merged main like 23 hours ago. Does that mean that there has been a new release of hash brown? Cargo hack. Did we break something? There's still some typos. Redirect. Axum extra. What was this one complaining about? On line 2. Maybe that was an old build that I was looking at. Let's see this one. That one passes now. Didn't it fail just before? Maybe I was looking at the wrong PR. All right, that is green. Then should be good to go. Let's call it fix typos in docs. Cool. I think that was all to do there. So this issue is basically the same one that we had in Axum last time, that we talked about last time on stream, where we when we run, we have a dependency whose minimum supported Rust version is higher than Tower HCP's minimum supported Rust version. And the solution is to install all your dependencies with, rather than the maximum matching version, you install it with the minimum matching version. But that led to a bunch of crates not even building at all, because we would get like version 0.1 or whatever of them. So the very hacky and not very pretty solution that we ended up doing in Axum was just having a second crate that pulls in a version of whatever crate that we know builds and sort of supports our MSRV. And this crate is just in the workspace, but is totally empty, and it just sort of exists to bump the minimum version that we get in. And these are all like transitive dependencies. So to fix this one in Tower HTTP, we'd basically have to do the same thing, which is a little annoying. It's kind of tedious to do that. You kind of have to run the build multiple times to see which crates fail and then pull in the right version. So I don't think I will deal with that on stream. I'll probably just do it off cam. In a separate red PR. Cool. But the PR that I actually wanted to look at today is this one. Because since last time I've started merging breaking pull requests that make breaking changes to move towards Axum 0.6. And this is one of those where we update to a new version of Matchit, which supports where if you have a wildcard, like if you have route /foo/rest, then you can still do /bar like these two routes won't be considered overlapping. In the previous version they would be, but that now works. And another change I also believe they made is that this one will not be matched by this one. I'm not quite sure about this one. But yeah, I think that was a good thing, because there were lots of people who were confused about like this one matching an empty path, basically. So there's some breaking changes there in updating to the latest version of Matchit, and then there's a bunch of other changes to how nesting works that I kind of wanted to do in the same vein. But it's been a while. It's been what, 18 days since I looked at this, so we probably have to like merge or rebase master or main, and then deal with those conflicts. The change that I also ended up making was what was the branch called? We would change nest so that it always accepts a router, and then we would add a separate service called nest service that just takes an opaque service. Because previously in axum we would basically try to downcast the type that you gave and then do different things depending on what it actually was, which introduced some like very subtle behavior that was not documented anywhere really. So like when you pass in a generic T, we say, is that T actually a router? And if so, we do one thing, otherwise we do another thing. It doesn't matter if I declare the wildcard route first and then the concrete one later. Yeah, it doesn't matter the order that you declare them in. Matchit, which axum internally uses for routing, just kind of puts everything together in the same tree, so the order doesn't matter. The order used to matter in axum 0.1 and 2 before we even using Matchit in the first place. But yeah, that's really nice. It also means that you can't accidentally define like unreachable routes. It'll give you a panic if there's an overlap. Yeah, so I think having two different ways to nest services is a little unfortunate. However, I don't think we can get around it. And that's because the way that they interact with fallbacks is different. So if you do, if you like, say API is router new route users, and then you say like all routes is nest at API, will nest the API routes, and then down here, if you say fallback, and then like some fallback. I think most people would expect that if someone calls like get API / foobar, then the fallback here will be called. The difference is that if you do nest service, if you do this one instead, and we nest it as an opaque service, that effectively means that if the request matches or has this prefix, then the request just goes into this second service. We have no idea what it is. We don't know what routes it accepts. We don't know what routes it doesn't accept. It might return a 404, but that obviously doesn't mean that it couldn't handle the route. It could mean that it actually did handle the route, but you did something like /ID here, and there just was no user with this given ID. So we can't just like magically handle all 404s and put them to the fallback. So it's almost like the request is just sort of lost. Like it'll go in there, who knows what response it'll send, it'll come back with. That's in the case when it's an opaque service, whereas if we just say we know it's a router, that means we know what routes it has. So that means that we can effectively loop over all the routes in the router and just like move them from one router to another. So this one, when you're doing a router, effectively just becomes the same as doing route API users ID, and then like whatever route you had up here. And that means it's just a regular route. The nesting is basically not there in the final thing, which means it does go to the fallback. You're saying you would not expect it to go to the fallback. But that means that if you want like a global 404 handler kind of thing, then for each thing, like for each place that you nest something, let's say we have some fallback service. That's like something. Then down here, you would have to do that again for each of them, just because you're nesting them. Isn't that kind of weird and sort of tedious that you would have to do that? Personally, I think so. I don't personally use nesting in this way, but I'm pretty sure that that is a thing that people do, to have their like API routes in one file and their whatever routes in a different file, and then they just sort of nest them together so they don't have to repeat this /API all the time. And then if you had to add the fallback each time, I mean, it's the kind of thing that we could just document and just say that's how it works. Because like from sort of an implementation point and like how big is your API, it definitely is nicer to only have the opaque nesting. And we can't only have the router nesting, because when you like serve a static file, you like do a static file server, you do like nest at like /assets or whatever. You serve dir new something. And this is a use case that we want to continue to support. And I don't see how to make that work with if Nest has to accept a router. Like you can do it with like a wildcard or something like that, but that's kind of weird. I think this use case is really nice, and so you can just nest the service if you want to. So yeah, it kind of seems like we need both, even though it's sort of unfortunate. Yeah. I don't even remember where we were on tests. Maybe we should just merge first, because I believe there were a bunch of doc tests that were failing. That we didn't update. I would expect the fallback to be more of a middleware layer on the outer service, where it would check for a 404 from the inner routers and then redirect based on that. Yeah, but the problem is then what if you have it at a route that you legitimately do handle, but you just, like the handler just happens to return a 404. You don't want that to go to the fallback. At least I don't think so. I don't think that's correct. I think if that's the kind of fallback that you want, then you can write a middleware for it yourself. I think it is more correct that the fallback is only called if there is no route in the router for it. But yeah, I get your point. Yeah, so there's definitely some doc tests that aren't failing, or that are failing rather, and that's because like this one, since it's nesting just any opaque service and not a router, it needs to call nest service instead. But I kind of just want to try to merge main. Let's see what happens. There's always stuff in the change log. Let's see. These we want to keep. This we want to keep. That we want to keep. The route /foo no longer matches. If you want to match /foo, you have to add a route specifically for that. Ah, yeah, so that's what I was talking before. This should probably say they request no longer matches that. So like an empty pattern at the end is not matched. I can kind of see both ways for this. I kind of think I like it more that it doesn't match. And if you specifically want to match like on an empty number of sort of segments at the end here, you have to add that route specifically. We've at least heard from a handful of people who wanted that behavior. So I think that makes sense. So these three are definitely related to what we're doing here. This one is not related. Path param for wildcards no longer include the prefix. Yeah, this is also related. So that was similar to what we were just talking about before, with another change in Matchit. So if you do foo, like rest, and you did get path params, and then like async, like that. Previously, and then if you called it with like /foo bar pass, previously this params thing would be bar bar. But now in Matchit, the wildcard doesn't include the first slash, so it'll just be like that. I don't personally care either way. I think that makes sense. I think it's more consistent since they don't match the empty path is not matched. So like this one wouldn't be matched. That kind of means it makes sense that the slash is not there because it's not sort of matched in that sense. Routes like foo and rest are no longer considered overlapping. Yep. And there's no PR numbers on any of those. So we just move them to the top. I never know how to like sort these things. Usually I go through at the end before making like a big 0.5 or 0.4 release and sort of group things in the changelog, and also like here's how you would write it before and here's how you sort of write it now, basically like an upgrade path. I don't know that I did that for 0.5 because there weren't that many sort of big breaking changes, but I definitely did earlier for, I think, 0.3. Yeah, so like here's how you used to do it, and here's how you have to do it now. Cool. That one is good. What was this about? This was a recent change that we did. Oh yeah. So router is basically cloned for every request because of how the into make service stuff works. And that means that all the routes, and this is the Matchit router is cloned, and the fallback is cloned as well. We can't, so that means that you sort of want the router to be as cheap to clone as possible. But we cannot wrap this one in an arc for reasons. Basically, endpoint is not sync, and we want it to be sync. Well, we want a router to be send, but an arc of something that is not sync is not send. So if there is an arc around a not send thing inside the router, then the whole router becomes not send, which we obviously want. Right? We want to be able to send routers across threads. Yeah, here. So in order for arc to be sync, the thing inside has to be both sync and send. And when you add a service to Axum, we don't require that the service is sync. We only require that it is send. So that then we can't wrap it in an arc. So here we only require send. But I mean, routers aren't very expensive to clone, but it just would be nice to do anyway. However, that's not the case for Node. Node, we actually can wrap in an arc. I discovered that a couple of days ago, so I just did a PR where we made that change. And Fallback, we can't wrap in an arc either, because it also contains an endpoint. Basically, that is not sync. So that's what this business is for here. I sort of feel like this bit, why wasn't that on main? That's because it's down here. We just sort of wrote it slightly differently. That should be like that. What the hell is this? This is nest. This is nest. And this is route. Okay. So this debug assert is basically when we've moved all the routes from one router to the other, the original, or rather the router that we're nesting, should be empty because we've removed all the routes. So that's what this debug assert is for. And it's a debug assert, so you only run it in debug mode and test builds and those things. I'm sort of wondering if there's any changes between these bits of the code. Nested. It looks the same, right? It's probably mostly indentation, because this stuff used to be in like one method inside a match that was sort of nested a few levels. So it probably needs to be like this. That's all the conflicts here. That was all the conflicts, it seems. It's not run the doc tests, just the lib tests. That one's missing. I think actually, yeah, I think I remember what that one was. So we used to have two places where we would like trigger, where we were inserting routes effectively, and then we just where if we inserted the route into the Matchit router and it came back with an error, then we just wanted the panic method or the panic message to be formatted a special way, so we just did that in its own method. But I think with the refactoring that we were doing here, we ended up with only that panic message being in one place, so we removed that function. I think that's what we were doing. Yeah, so you can see this is the method here, and it's basically only called in one place now. And I think there are also some issues with, oh yeah, I forgot this. A really nice sort of side effect of the overlapping of the wildcard routes not overlapping anymore is that if you do something like, previously you wouldn't be able to do router new nest at slash. Like these routes would basically be conflicting, because a nest actually becomes a route like this, just a wildcard, where it'll then strip the prefix that you wrote here. And in the previous version of Matchit, these two routes were conflicting, but they're not anymore. So you can totally do this, which is really cool. It's something that a lot of people try to do sometimes and run into problems with. And that's why we were specifically tracking internally in the router if you had called nest with a single slash, because then if we ended up on like getting an overlapping route, then we could give a more precise error message in that case. But like we just don't have that failure condition anymore because those routes are not considered overlapping. So that's why we just had the one method here. Like that. There's one more error here. Oh yeah, this is probably in the loop that we removed when we were doing the merge conflict. The one that was way indented, it probably had fixes for these. So what is nested path? Because we have to add another star. And this one probably needs another star too. And that's because nested path is a reference to an arc stir. So it's like arc stir. So when you if you do like star foo, you get an arc stir, and then you do a star again, that gives you a stir, and then finally you borrow it because this type is unsized, so you have to have a reference in front. Yeah. I feel like it took me a long time to understand how many borrows and how many stars you need. So usually in the beginning when you get those kinds of errors, it's just like add another star, call.asRef, add an ampersand, add another ampersand. Okay, fuck, now you actually read the error message and figure out what's wrong. Yeah. Ooh, there's a test that fails. And I generally don't bother with like rebasing these kinds of things. I don't even know how many commits there were. I don't really care about merge bubbles in like merge commits in sort of PR branches because we squash merge everything anyway. So the history is totally linear, which is kind of nice. And I find that merging rather than rebasing gives fewer merge conflicts because it like considers all the changes at once or something like that. But yeah, we had a failing test. Which one was that? That was routing mod 163. But which test was it actually? Wait. We're running the test for axum extra. Let's just run them for axum first. Okay, those pass. So that is actually something in axum extra. That's curious. Resource. Actually, before we spend time on this, I just remembered that this one is pinned to a PR in Matchit, but we don't need to do that anymore because it is released. I think it's 0.6. Yeah. 0.6. I expect it to still fail, probably. Yep. Insertion failed due to conflict with previously registered route. Edit. Okay. Let's just run the tests in their own tab. So that passes. I'm just sort of curious which two routes were actually conflicting. It probably said in the output if I just actually read it. And the reason that I added the type alias here is I expect if you don't put it there, Rust can't infer the type that you actually want. Yeah, so router is generic over the request body, and even if it has a default type, if you don't specify that anywhere or like use this type in a way that Rust can sort of figure out what the type has to be, then it just complains like, please give it a specific type. So we can just do that, and then when you specify the type like this, then it does figure out like, hey, the type had a default here, and then it uses that. So which actually failed? All right, it doesn't say. I wonder if we can see it in the backtrace. Because like we add edit, and then one of these other routes is conflicting with it. Nest service, resource 149.199. I don't know. Let's just do it the lazy way. Is it update? Is it really the first one? No. There we go. Is it the same error? Let's just remove the backtrace. Yep. And if we only have those two, do they still conflict? Yes. All right, so now we actually have to do that thing where we figure out what's wrong. Nest. What does that call? That calls nest service. Okay, I see what's wrong. So the issue is that this one, like this used to just call nest, which would figure out internally in the router that, hey, this one is actually a router, so we can just add it the other way. Which means I think if we actually had made this one an opaque service such that it would have been nested in the basically the way that nest service does, I think we'd probably have gotten the same error. So basically we need two methods here. We need a nest and a nest service in the same way that just calls the corresponding method on the router. Yeah, I think if we nuke that one and then we say if we just change the signature briefly to something like this, then I do expect it to work. Don't want the path. Yeah. But does that mean that nest on a resource is only like I'm just sort of curious if nest service, if we added that here, if that would ever be useful. I'm not sure. What does this path actually return? That's just like /users/user ID, I think. Users self.name we get here in the constructor, so that's like users. So that's just making the URL param. Nest. Honestly, I kind of think I want to not deal with this and then actually just do that later. Because I kind of want to try and move forward in the changes that we have to make in axum. So we can probably just say that the tests in tower in axum extra will just have to remain. That we basically will let them fail for now, and then we'll get back to them later. We can just add a comment here. Figure out if you need just to make sure it still fails. Because there were some to-dos on the issue that I kind of think I'd rather look at. There are also the doc tests for axum itself that we have to fix. It's taken a long time. The bars that I have up here at the top is CPU usage, and you can see they're all maxed out, so it was actually doing stuff. Cool, and let's go ahead and merge this. And look at the PR. This one. Update docs, write docs, update examples. Yes, I remember from last stream, there was like this one of the nesting tests that were sort of weird. Let's actually just make a note about resource. Axum extra resource. I think it's in routing. Yep. And if you're not familiar with resource, it's just sort of a convenient router kind of thing that adds the conventional REST resourceful routes. So you give it like the name of your resource, and then you call index and give it a handler, and it automatically knows that you want to get / and then the resource name. And same for like create new, show, all the common names for these. Fix tests for that. There was like one of them here that were sort of weird. I think I remember that with the changes in how the wildcard params were handled, where like an empty path doesn't match anymore, this test case became significantly simpler because it used to have to do like a trailing / redirect, and that feature we've also removed now. So I think this is fine actually. Let's just double check. Nest is the path we nest the inner router at. So if we do like, I feel like I should probably refactor this macro because last stream we did this exact same exercise. So we have a route. The route the inner router accepts. We accept / and then we nest that at /a, and then we'd expect that to be able to call that as just /a. That makes sense. And if we wanted this behavior instead, then you have to nest it with an additional trailing / at the end, which we have a test case for right here. Cool. So I think that is good, actually. Maybe we should look at the doc tests. Oops. I just saw, like, it sounded like I was in the middle of a merge from my prompt, but that was just because I hadn't refreshed. Does it run doc tests in parallel? It doesn't feel like it. If I do this, does it then only run those? I'm running 18 tests. Well, it's fewer. How many did we have before? 108. Nice. Routing on this line. That is probably in one of these docs. It's both good and bad that we put the docs in their own markdown files. I like that because some of the docs for the methods are quite long. So then this file doesn't get super long, and it's sort of easier to just see the Rust code and then keep the docs in a separate markdown file. But it makes, like, these line errors here are basically wrong now, and you just kind of sort of have to guess where it actually is. It's a little annoying. Here. So this one is nest service. And then this next one is, if we just search for this, we'll probably find it. Yeah, so this is service. This is a little weird though, because like the docs for nest are now mentioning both nest and nest service. We probably have to rewrite that. Let's see. And this is like /API. And that is a router. Which one is actually failing? Is it in a different method? Yeah, it's on route. I think it's in here as well. Route. Yeah, so here we have to call nest service. So I don't think this is the one that, like, we have some tests that are like, this example should panic. I don't think it's this one because it doesn't call nest at all. Neither does this one. Let's see this one. This is about overlapping routes. Check out when using a request router nest as it behaves like a wildcard router. Therefore, this setup panics. It doesn't panic anymore. Well, maybe it kind of feels like it should panic. I'm curious. Because if we're nesting it as an opaque service, right? Let's pull that into its own test. Foobar. shouldn't panic. Is it faster if we don't build with all features? Maybe. Because the routing stuff is always enabled. I wonder how much CPU streaming actually takes. It says encoding overloaded in OBS. What does that mean? CPU is at 33%. All right, cool. So it doesn't panic. I kind of expect that it would, right? Because like any, no, I guess not, because this nest service is the same as this, and those are not considered overlapping anymore. Right. Is that confusing? I don't think so. I mean, even if you do this, if you sort of explicitly add a second route, then I suppose you want that to be called, and that's why you added a route for it. Yeah, I think that's probably fine. These cases are often like judgment calls, I feel like. You could like open an issue and like ask people for feedback. I don't know. Yeah, so I think that makes sense that this one doesn't panic anymore, so we can remove that. Also panics if path is empty. Run the doc test again. I think that was all of them, right? Are doc tests not run in parallel? Doesn't seem like it. Cool. Great. Let's just commit that. And then open the docs and let's have a look at them. Routing, router. Create a new router. And the reason that this link is missing is because we compiled the docs with the no dependencies flag, because then it doesn't, like, it can't find tower for whatever reason. But it does actually work when you do it for real. This all seems fine, right? Because it's not related to nesting. Here, path can end in key, which matches all segment and will store the segments captured at key. Wildcard captures can also be extracted using path. I wonder if we have like something in here about how wildcards work. We need to update. I can capture all parameters. I don't think so. Nope, that's fine. And it doesn't explicitly mention here whether the slash is included. We should probably add that. I think that makes sense. That is in the docs for route, which is where we are now. How would you say that? Wildcard routes can also be extracted using path. Note that the leading slash is not included i.e. like that one. For the route and path. The value of rest will be barbas. It is not included, i.e. for the route that and the path, the value of rest will be, I was wrong, it's that. Specifically said the leading slash is not included. Accepting multiple methods, I think this is the same. Yeah, this is not related to wildcards or nesting. More examples. Yeah, that is fine. Running to any service. This is the same. Panics if the route overlaps with another route. That's the same. Route cannot be used to nest routers. Use route and nest instead. That's still correct. Same to result in a panic. Cool. Nest. Nest the crew routes or service at some path. This allows you to break your application into smaller parts and compose them together. How the URI changes. This is the same. Capture from outer routes. This is the same too. This is about how if the path that you nest that itself has captures, then those captures will sort of appear in the inner route as well, even though they're not explicitly mentioned here. Nesting services. So this bit needs to be moved because this will require nesting. Opaque services. Differences to wildcard routes. Nested routes are similar to wildcard routes. The difference. Let's use the whole URI. Where's nested routes? See the prefix stripped. Yeah. We probably need this section in both of them. And then we need to change this example to use a router. Panics if the route overlaps with another route. If the route contains a wildcard, if path is empty. If the nested router has a fallback. Yeah. This is only true if you're using nest and not nest service, because we can't know if an opaque service has a fallback or not. This is because router only allows a single fallback. So this is the hope, effectively, that we'll be able to change this with how Matchit no longer allows foo and then a wildcard to you still have that route with foo and bar. Because currently the way that fallbacks is implemented is that it's like its own special service where fallback is either a custom or default, and then a route is just a single route that also implements service. And then when you actually go to call it, we look in the router if we actually have that path. If we don't have it, then we basically call the fallback at that point. And so the idea is that we can basically change this since those the wildcard routes no longer overlap. Then we can change fallback to just be a regular wildcard route. That's the goal, at least, so that fallback is not a special thing anymore. It's just a regular wildcard route. I haven't done that yet, so I'm not sure if it is actually possible, but I feel like it probably is. The only thing that's kind of unknown is how you handle changing the fallback. I'm not sure how we could do that. Maybe we need to because we have like a hash map of all the routes. So we probably need to like track which of these routes, which of these endpoints are the fallback. So maybe we need like another one here that's like fallback or something like that. Yeah. Cool. So there's no docs for nest service yet. I think we can go ahead and do that. Updating the docs is what we're doing now. Nest service. This one should build. Nest a group of routes. This is now nest a router at some path. This allows you to break your application in smaller pieces and compose them. That's still true. Nest a service at some path. And I think it can automatically figure out this link from the imported service. We probably want an example. What should that be? Static files, maybe. Just sort of a simple version. Serve static files. It's a little unfortunate to use that as the example because that's not how you actually serve static files. You do that with the serve dir from Tower HTTP. What else might be good? What other examples do we use here? These are like separate sort of API things. Nesting services. Honestly, I don't know if there is another use case for nesting opaque services than serving static files. Maybe we should just use that as the example. Like that. We're also gonna have to like call out what the differences are. Differences between nest and nest service. You might have to call those out on both methods. Question mark. How the URI changes. I'll not see the original URI, but instead of match prefix stripped, that's the same. Captures from outer routes is also the same. Should we repeat that, or should we just be like, nest service works in the same way? We can probably do that. Capture from outer routes, that also works the same. I feel like we should probably have a test for that. I'm not sure that we do. Nest at capture. We do actually. Cool. I'm fairly confident that it works as well without nest, because again it just merges the routes, so it's just a regular route in that case. Nesting services. Similar to this. Nest can, for example, we use with serve dir to serve static files from a directory. Then we can nuke this section. This bit is the same. Nested services are similar to wildcard routes. The difference is that wildcard routes see the whole UI, whereas nested services will have the prefix stripped. Yes. And so this one should be, that can be get. Let's go ahead and call this one route. Like that. And then change this one to just nest, because that's the method that we're documenting. URI will not contain /bar. That's because that's what we're nesting at. Right. If the route overlaps, contains a wildcard, path is empty, as the browser has a fallback. Cool. Nest behaves in the same way as nest service in terms of. Would you do that? We could make them links. Maybe that's kind of nice. That, so you could like click on them. Captures. And how the URI changes. Let's just build the docs to see what that actually looks like. Wait, that one didn't work. Because we have two of the things, how the UI changes, captures from outer routes, differences to wildcards. Yep. Differences between nest and nest service. And that was the fallback example that we were talking about before. So let's say that we have some service, doesn't really matter what it is. /foo. Axum router. We need a handler for the into service method. And then what do we actually want to say? The fallback is not called for requests that start with /foo. And then we can say, is that the only difference? Because then we can say like that's the main difference or something like that. I don't think that like anything else comes to mind. Nope. Well, if you say the main difference, it sounds like there are other differences too. You can say nest and nest service differs in when differs differs when it comes to fallbacks, differs in terms of fallbacks, words, differs how fallbacks when fallbacks are called differs between nest and nest service. I kind of feel like this section should actually go over here. And then over here, we can like provide a link to it. So we can grab this one, copy this, and then say C difference between nest and nest service for like you say like how these two methods are different, but that's kind of silly because that's like what we just wrote up here. For that's probably fine. Is that not how you spell differs? To no E at the end. When fallbacks are called, when fallbacks are called, it differs between nest and nest service. Nest will call the fallback from the outer router. Nest service will not. That's actually kind of nice. Then we can say this is like nested router. Probably nest the router first. And this is foo, this is bar. But will be called for requests starting with foo if nested router doesn't have a matching route. The fallback is not called for requests that start with bar, but will be called for requests starting with foo. Starting with foo if nested router doesn't have a matching route. I was sort of wondering if we could be like, think of nest as just moving the routes, and think of nest service as like actually doing an opaque service and just sort of letting the request go in there. Maybe this is fine. When fallbacks, I kind of want to say how. But like they're called in the same way. It's more about when they're called. I think this should be a link. Difference between nest and nest service. Nest will call the fallback from the outer router. This is wrong. It's not nest that calls the fallback. Routers nested with nest will delegate to the fallback if they don't have a matching route, whereas nest service will not. This example isn't really great actually, because this service accepts all routes as long as they're get. It basically doesn't care about the path. feel like bringing in another static file serving over here is like a lot of noise in this example. It's not really relevant to what we're trying to say. It's probably also confusing that this router doesn't actually have any routes on it. Let's call this API. Just so there actually is something there. And then this one is assets. Let's say this is any. It's like the fallback stuff only really matters if the thing that you're nesting is another router. Like if you're using nest service with a router. Because otherwise, you're most likely nesting a servdir. And that has its own fallback machinery that'll return 404s if it can't actually find the file. So making this, that makes it kind of seem like this example here should be a router and not just an anything. And by the way, any is this one. It's similar to like get and post, the return a method router, but it just accepts any request or any method. What would you call that? Call it could call it something like that, and then say like .route is app.js. Like that. I think I'll add a note about actually serving static files. Note, I feel like if we don't say something like this, then people are probably just gonna assume that, oh, this is how you nest, like do static files. Note that you would normally use this one for serving static files and thus not calling serve nest service with a router. Cool. Do we explain it well enough? Writing docs is hard, man. Nest service. I feel like it keeps zooming out. That's kind of annoying. I want it to stay zoomed in so you guys can read it. How the UI changes. Can we just like for more details on how these methods are different or something? It's like we say differ and differ like twice in a row. That's kind of weird. See difference between nest and nest service. I can probably just say see also. See also. Nest behaves in the same way as nest in terms of. No, we can probably do this. But differs with regards to fallbacks. See this one for more details. That feels like it reads better. Nest service behaves in the same way as nest in terms of yada yada, but differs with regards to fallbacks. Let's make that a link. With regards to fallbacks, see nest and nest service for more details. Nice. Example, nest, that is nest service. Nest service can, for example, be used with tower services serve dir to serve static files from a directory. Serves files inside the public directory at get/assets. Cool. And how does the docs for nest read? Nest a router at some path. This allows you to break your application into smaller pieces. This was mostly the same. We didn't touch it. Nice. We don't call nest services anymore. We call it down here. Cool. Routing, router. Let's just run the doc test and make sure that we didn't break anything or miss imports or something like that. On this guy. Yeah, so there's a bunch of the tests where I basically like make an async block that just runs a server. And because we don't await this outer async block, it doesn't actually stall running the tests. The main reason that we did this was to ensure that it can actually figure out what the type is. Because like we talked about before, otherwise Rust can't quite figure out what the request body type is. But you don't actually need to do that. I realized that you can just write, if you just write let underscore router, like that, that also works. It's just a bit shorter. I just haven't updated all the docs yet. I think that was the only one that was failing. Cool. Does that mean we are good? This doesn't need to be route layer. Nope. Merge. No fallback. Add a fallback service to the router. This service will be called if no routes matches the incoming request. Aren't matched by anything in the router. If the handler is matched by request or for fourth fallback is not called. Yeah. Nice. I don't know that there's any other places that we need to fix. Yeah, so we fixed these to-dos here. Let's just call it update docs. did that. We did that. Update examples. Probably don't need to run them. We can probably just check them. All right, the examples all work. And the reason that I cd'd into the examples directory is we don't actually keep the examples in the same workspace as all the other crates, because they have a bunch of dependencies that you would effectively have to compile every time you were working on Axum, which was just kind of annoying. So we just moved them into their own workspace inside of the examples directory, just to slow down or speed up compile times a little bit when you're working locally. Let's see, so that's done. This one is good. That one we still need to figure out. What was this about? This change means nested opaque services will only see the matched path from their point of view, i.e. with the inner routes will see the match as foo and not that. This is consistent with how URI works. If you're nesting a router with nests, then things work the way they used to since there's no nesting and the routes are moved. Yeah, that makes sense. And that panic was gone. Cool. There's a whole bunch of things that fail. So this is probably the axum extra stuff. I wonder what this is. No matched path and extract. I think that's because matched path is behind a feature flag. Yeah. So we can just say this is create, extract, and then it should complain that this import is unused. Cool. And the reason that it's behind a feature flag, it's turned on by default, but it has a small amount of overhead. Like it adds an extension and makes an arc and that stuff. So if you don't want to use this feature, you can just turn it off, and then you get a small performance benefit. But yeah, it's turned on by default. So here, match path. Cool. That means we can probably look at this one. Why doesn't it fail? I'm confused. Didn't that fail just before? Isn't that what I wrote? Is it because it actually fails here? Huh. Did it do that earlier today as well? Or did we like change this? Did we make any changes to that file? I don't think so. Maybe we did, I just forgot. Oh yeah, it used to be nest. Now it's nest service. All right. Do we really need 2 more methods? I kind of feel like we can just change these to always take a router. Because like we talked about before, the main use case, actually, it's super dark in here. I think I'll just go turn on some light. I should get some like headlights or something super cool. It does look nice with the light though, but I'll be right back. I'll just turn on the light. Yeah, now you can see my face again. So, yeah, like we were talking about before, the main use case for Nest service is static files, basically. And if you want the different fallback behavior, otherwise they're the same, basically. And when would you nest like static files at in a resource? I feel like that's kind of weird, right? You probably wouldn't do that. That also means that if nest and nest collection call like this, then if we want to add like a nest collection service or a nest service here, we can still do that. Those names haven't been used for anything else. So that's fine. So I think I'll actually make that change. That's also slightly simpler. Router. Nest collection. And I don't think it should panic because the routes don't conflict, right? Yeah. Like that. That should work. Awesome. But that was a breaking change though, so we should note that in the change log. Breaking resource nest and now only accepts router. Like that. We can probably add links to the changelog here too. This one, this one, this one. So much change in this one PR. Those were all the to-dos, right? only accept router in the change log. Commit messages are not super important. I mean, we're gonna squash it anyway. It's mostly for the person reviewing. Very nice. I'm now curious if all the tests are gonna pass. If so, I think we're actually ready for review. That means that we can probably try to look into the fallback stuff. Let's just briefly look over what changed. This is in resource. I think that's good. That's just changing some types and making that work. Nest another route at the collection level. That doc is so weird. Another router. Router. It's a little odd that it says like another, but I'll just leave that for now. Nest service. Change log stuff. Matchit updated. The latest was 0. Matchit 0.60, right? Yeah. And nest a router at some path. Doc stuff. It's not included. That was that bit. That was a thing that just works now. It's no longer a panic. Yeah, there's some changes in how matched path is called. I don't specifically remember what this was, but I know that we have tests for this, so I'm fairly confident that it still works. This thing, we don't need to track whether you've nested anything at the root anymore, because that doesn't conflict, which is nice. That was broken into 2 methods. What changed here? I think, was that the breaking change? What did we actually change in match path? Match path. I'm wondering if there's a breaking change there that we need to be aware of or need to like document or something. I'm not sure. Let's just try it in the Hello World example. That's usually where I test out these kinds of changes. So we want to make a route, let's say nest at /a router new route. Async. And then if we say matched path is matched path, I don't know why Rust Analyzer doesn't want to complete it. There we go. And then we can say stir, I believe. Just return that so that we can actually see it. And what I'm most interested in is how did the behavior change between the two, and sort of whether you're nesting at a collection or not. So let's first actually test with the released version of Axum 0.5. Foobar. Yeah, so it sees, in this case, it sees the whole path, and that's because it's just a regular router. It sort of notices that. And if we add tower, version 0.4, util. Then here we can say box clone. And that's just to make it an opaque service so that the old version of Matchit will see it. Service ext. Let's just write it down so we don't forget it. 0.5 router opaque. Yeah, that gets the same. And then on the main, like that. I expect this one to work the same. And it does. I think this one works differently. Although I'm not sure. I do remember looking into that and being like, whether that was something that we could fix or not. Yeah, that's different. So I think that's probably worth reinvestigating, and at the very least it needs to go in the change log because it is an actual sort of observable change. Let's see, matched path. I'm curious if we have a test for it. Access matched path. I know that this one does like a bunch of different combinations. Foo handler. So when you call foo, we cannot call foo / because nest service registers route for foo rest and / foo. does this mean? Why is it? So that's the, like when you nest a service internally, it becomes a wildcard effectively, and this is the param name that we use for that wildcard. So it becomes like the route that you get inside in the router is like whatever you nested at. So like nested path and then star and then that thing. But I'm sort of curious why, like, that's not, isn't that different from the behavior that we saw over here? Like, we didn't see that thing here. Yet this one passed. And we do nest something at foo. What if we only call that and then sort of remove all the other things? Run that test. Can't infer type. That's fine. Probably just do with default features. I don't really know if that actually matters because we didn't change any of those files. I don't know. Definitely does pass. What does this one do? Path as extractor. I am so confused. How's that different? Whoops. Comment that out. This stuff we can remove, that we can remove. I don't think we care about the middleware any, either. So this test is about, does the match path used as an extractor and used as a middleware, do they see the same thing, or do they see the correct thing, basically? And in here, in this case, they both see the same thing, so we can basically just ignore the middleware. That's our handler. We can remove this guy. All this we can nuke. Yeah, and then if we call foo_baz, import some things. Whoops. Yeah. What if we change it to this? And that's not found because the route is /foo. So now we're back at the example that we had before. Foo bar. Is that because the inner router, this guy, this one here, sets the overrides the match path? And that is the change that we saw down here. All this stuff here. Because this effectively checks if there already is a matched path, and if so, it appends to it. Like it takes the one out and gets the content and puts them together. I'm curious why I removed this last time I worked on this. It feels wrong. Yeah. So like if we just do that, then we match it at /. But if you just do that, like those things are sort of equivalent, right? Well, I mean, sort of. This one accepts any request, and this one only if at the root. But I feel like if we just call them the same way, then they should match the same. But we don't get the same out. That feels like it's wrong to me. So maybe we're missing a test here, actually. Yeah. What should we call it? Nested opaque routers don't override append to matched path. So then we say router new nest at A, router new nest, or we can say route B get path as third to owned. Get foo bar. What was it complaining about? Oh, and this needs to be nest service. No, it worked, okay. Res text should be A and B. there's 2 different versions. Wait, what? Because we're in the examples folder. Yeah, so that's the behavior that we saw before. And what was this in? This was in call route. Yeah, so this is the thing that does it. Basically, if there, regardless if there already is an extension for this, we remove it or override it. I'm sort of curious if we just put that back. Does that work? Let's try to get it from main. So it was all this stuff. That constant we seem to have removed. I think I saw that in the PR. So that works. I feel like the other test is probably going to fail now. No. What? Why did I remove it? That is weird. I don't remember why I made that change. Maybe I was like, there was like some bug in the implementation and I thought that it couldn't be fixed. So I changed match path to work the way it used to. And then I figured out that it actually could be fixed, but I forgot to revert match path or something like that. I don't quite remember. Let's just run all the tests and then I'll be back in like 2 minutes. I just gotta get some water. All right, we're back. Ooh. Our good friend nest number 7 failed. Test nest. I'm honestly wondering, Can we just expand the macro? Ugh. Technically yes, but like very unhelpful. Because it expands like the whole thing. I mean, let's just type it out. The name is nest7. Whoops. This one is wait. That, did it used to have a trailing slash? No, right? What's the file? Routing test nest. Routing test nest. Yeah, it didn't. I probably just fat fingered that in. Nest7. That was good that I caught that. We could have spent a long time on that. Hopefully that means it passes. There we go. Let's just run everything again to be sure. And doc test as well, might as well do that. I feel like this description here could probably be expanded with exactly what changed and all that to make it easier to review. And these changes we fixed locally with these failures. I'm a little worried that this one is failing. Ah, that's failing for the same reason. All right. But it did actually build. That's good. Cool. Well, that was very nice that we caught that. That was cool. So what did we actually add? You can just nuke the changes in the examples directory. You don't need those. This is the same. Or rather, it's back to what it was. Fix match path with nested with routers. Nested with like that. Is GitHub just slow, or is it not actually running tests? All right. Let's look one last time at the changes that we made. It is less code overall, so I mean, that is nice. But that's kind of hard to count because like a significant part of the code is just docs. So router. Oh yeah, that was in resource. Docs, Matchit. I don't believe we expose Matchit errors anywhere. You can't downcast to them, so we don't need to note that in the changelog either. This is fine. That was the new test that we added. We could do one that goes like multiple or more levels deep than just one, but I'm fairly confident that it still works. This is all fine. That's just breaking the thing into two methods. These were the tests for that we generated nice compilers. If you had a nested thing at the root and you also called route with something else, but that doesn't fail anymore, so those tests are gone. Nest service. I feel like I almost want to make like a big macro that has a bunch of tests that exercises. Like I feel like all the tests that I write for nest, I also want the same tests but for nest service, just to make sure that they behave like in the same way, except fallback, like the one way with it where we actually know that they're different. It feels like that could be a macro that we'll write one day. I don't know. Yeah, so hopefully CI is gonna pass. I think so. We've been going for like over 2 hours now, like 2.5 hours. I think this is probably gonna be the end of the stream. Yeah, I mean, if CI doesn't pass, it'll probably just be minor things that we have to fix. And then I think I just want to expand the PR description, and then we can probably make this ready for review and hopefully get it merged. And then I think for next stream, we can actually work on changing the way the fallbacks work. Yeah. And then like, and even if this PR doesn't get merged beforehand, we can still, like, we can just base off of this branch, and that'll be fine. So yeah, I thank you all for joining, and I think we will end the stream here. And yeah, I will see you at the next one. You can go ahead and follow me on Twitter. I always post ahead of time there if I stream, and I also post link to the recordings afterwards if you weren't here from the beginning. But yeah, otherwise, thank you so much for joining, and take care. See ya.